How do you turn a vague request like build a dashboard into something the Agile team can understand, estimate, and test? That is where user stories help. In this video, we'll look at what a user story is, what makes a story effective, how the invest criteria work, and how user stories help teams focus on user value instead of just completing tasks. A vague request like build a dashboard leaves too many unanswered questions. Who is it for? What information do they need? Why do they need it? How will we know it is complete? Without that clarity, the team may build something that technically works but does not solve the user's real problem. A good user story creates shared understanding by connecting the work to the user, the need, and the value being delivered. A user story is a short description of a user need or capability. It is usually written from the perspective of the user or customer. The common format is, as a user, I want capability, so that value or benefit. For example, as a project sponsor, I want to view project status by schedule, cost, and risk level so that I can quickly identify projects that need executive attention. This is much clearer than simply saying, build a dashboard. Now the team understands who needs the dashboard, what they need to see, and why it matters. A user story is not a full requirements document. It is a starting point for conversation, clarification, and collaboration. Let's break down the three parts. The first part is the user. In our example, the user is the project sponsor. Being specific matters. A story that says, as a user, is often too broad. Different users may need very different things. A project sponsor may care about executive-level status. A project manager may care about task-level detail. A team member may care about assigned work. The more specific the user role, the easier it is to understand the real need. The second part is the capability. In our example, I want to view project status by schedule, cost, and risk level. This describes what the user wants to do. Notice that it focuses on the user's need, not the technical implementation. It does not say, create a SQL database or build a reporting service. Those may become technical tasks later, but the user story should focus on the capability the user needs. The third part is the value. In our example, so that I can quickly identify projects that need executive attention. This explains why the story matters. The value statement helps the team make better decisions. If the team understands the purpose, they may find a simpler or better way to deliver the same outcome. Without the value statement, the team may know what to build, but not why it matters. A good user story should clearly answer four questions. Who needs it? What do they need? Why do they need it? How will we know it is complete? The first three questions are usually answered by the user story itself. The fourth question is answered by the acceptance criteria, which we will discuss shortly. A strong user story should focus on user or business value, not just technical activity. It should be small enough to complete within a sprint or iteration. It should be clear enough for the team to estimate. And it should be testable, so the team can verify whether it has been completed successfully. The goal is not to write a perfect document. The goal is to create enough shared understanding for the team to have a useful conversation and deliver the right value. One framework Agile teams often use to evaluate user stories is called INVEST. INVEST helps the team check whether a story is ready to be discussed, estimated, and eventually delivered. Independent means the story should be as independent as possible from other stories. When stories are too dependent on one another, prioritization and planning become harder. Negotiable means the story should support conversation. It is not meant to be a rigid contract. Details can be clarified and refined as the team learns more. Valuable means the story should deliver value to the customer, user, or business. If the value is unclear, the team should ask why the work is needed. Estimable means the team should be able to estimate the work. If the story is too vague, too large, or poorly understood, estimation becomes difficult. Small means the story should be small enough to complete within a sprint or iteration. Large stories usually need to be split into smaller pieces. Testable means the team should be able to verify whether the story is complete. If the team cannot test it, the story may need clearer acceptance criteria. Now let's talk about acceptance criteria. If the user story explains the need, the acceptance criteria explain how the team will know that the need has been met. Acceptance criteria define the conditions that must be true for the story to be accepted. They help reduce misunderstanding between the product owner, stakeholders, testers, and development team. Let's continue with our example. As a project sponsor, I want to view project status by schedule, cost, and risk level, so that I can quickly identify projects that need executive attention. Possible acceptance criteria might include: the dashboard displays schedule status, cost status, and risk level. High-risk projects are visually highlighted. The sponsor can filter projects by department or portfolio. Notice what the acceptance criteria do. They make the story more specific. They clarify what the team needs to build. They also make the story testable. Without acceptance criteria, the team may understand the general idea but still disagree about what "done" actually means. It helps to separate the purpose of the user story from the purpose of the acceptance criteria. The user story explains the need. The acceptance criteria explain the conditions for acceptance. The story answers: who needs it? What do they need? Why do they need it? The acceptance criteria answer: how will we know the story is complete? This distinction is important because many teams write a user story but forget to define clear acceptance criteria. When that happens, the story may look simple but still create confusion during development or testing. User stories are often refined collaboratively. Stakeholders and customers help explain the need and business value. The development team helps clarify feasibility, effort, assumptions, dependencies, and technical considerations. Testers may identify edge cases and quality concerns. This collaboration is important because a user story is not meant to be written once and handed off. It is refined over time through conversation. Now let's look at some common mistakes. One mistake is writing the story as a technical task instead of a user need. For example, create a database table for project status. That may be a valid technical task, but it does not explain the user, the need, or the value. A better user story would focus on what the user is trying to accomplish. Another mistake is using a vague role like user when a more specific role would be clearer. A project sponsor, project manager, team member, and customer may all need different things. The more specific the role, the clearer the story becomes. Another common mistake is leaving out the value statement. If the story says what to build but not why it matters, the team loses important context. Teams also run into problems when stories are too large. Large stories are harder to estimate, harder to test, and harder to complete within a sprint. When a story becomes too large, it should usually be split into smaller stories. Another mistake is missing or vague acceptance criteria. For example, saying, "Dashboard should work correctly." That is too vague. A clearer acceptance criterion would describe what must be displayed, what filters must work, or what condition must be met. Finally, teams sometimes confuse acceptance criteria with the definition of done. Acceptance criteria are specific to one story. The definition of done applies more broadly to all work the team completes. For example, the definition of done may include coding standards, testing, review, documentation, and deployment expectations. Acceptance criteria define what must be true for this specific story to be accepted. To recap, a good user story should answer 4 questions. Who needs it? What do they need? Why do they need it? How will we know it is complete? The user story answers the first 3. The acceptance criteria answer the 4th. A strong story focuses on user value, is small enough to complete, clear enough to estimate, and testable enough to verify. If you found this helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to PM Aspirant. And for more project management resources, visit pmaspirant.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.